Yo, what is going on, guys? Membro here, back at it with another college football weekly podcast. I didn't really think I really wanted to do a podcast for this week because it kind of seemed like, not all these games are going to be great. But it turned out to be a really fun and exciting weekend of college football. And I mean, come on, I want to just get right into this thing because top to bottom, there's so much to talk about. And let's start with the top, and let's start with Georgia, the Georgia Bulldogs. They found themselves down 14-3. 14-3 at halftime against South Carolina at home. It was not looking good. And what Georgia showed in that second half was big time resilience. Carson Beck, he showed up. There's some questions. New quarterback coming in for Stetson Bennett, who was two-time winning quarterback, championship winning quarterback. Carson Beck, that's big shoes to fill. And he showed up. He was calm. He was composed. He looked really good out there. And Georgia did some old-fashioned run game down. Just kept running it down South Carolina. And once they really kind of hooked on to what Spencer Rattler was doing, once South Carolina found themselves down 17-14 and 24-14, constantly having to pass in a really wet game, Georgia really put their noses down, stopped it all for Spencer Rattler, and he was really shut down in that second half. You look at it, 0 points in the second half. It was a really tale of two halves, really, like that old saying. But Georgia gets the win, and I think this is a really important win for them to really, cement themselves as the number one team in the country still. Showed why they're that number one team. Does it again to another SEC East opponent, which they do every single year. Every year, you see kind of teams have a little bit of hope. You saw, I think last year it might have been Missouri, which Missouri, by the way, got a huge win against Kansas State. We might get into that, but every year it's an SEC East team maybe has a shot at dethroning Georgia, and then that second half comes around and Georgia makes the adjustments. Kirby Smart makes the adjustments, and they show why they are the number one team for going on like 3 years now. Huge win for the Bulldogs. But let's go down Michigan. They handle Bowling Green. Michigan again. To me, they are my number two team just because giving them the grace of kind of last year. They have not had really any tests, so we're still waiting on tests for Michigan. They played Bowling Green. They beat them 31-6. Kind of shaky in the beginning there, but overall they handled Bowling Green. And I mean, I want to look at who they have next in their schedule. They have Rutgers. They have Nebraska. Like, this schedule is pretty easy. They have at Minnesota, which I think will be the first real test. But like looking down, I think Michigan, they'll probably run the table until they run into Penn State, who I think Penn State right now, looking at it just from based off the first 3 weeks, I think might be the best all-around team in the Big Ten. The Big Ten has really just been Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State, and overall consistently good, and what's really, a team that has really shown me that I think that they can dethrone Michigan and that they can dethrone Penn State. This could finally be Penn State's year again. They're looking really good. Drew Aller is showing up at quarterback. That defense is ferocious. We can get to them as well. But going back, Miami, I guess on Thursday, played Bethune-Cookman, handled them. Is Miami really back? We'll see. They got some tests ahead. Speaking of tests, Florida State ekes by Boston College. Upset trap. It was in Boston. Rainy game. A lot of these East Coast games were rainy because of the hurricane season and all of that. But very close to losing this thing, and a Boston College penalty cost Boston College the upset. So Florida State, they eke by. I think when you compare them, I think they're in a similar realm to Texas in that they got their big win against an SEC team. They're consistently kind of these teams that have a lot of expectations and kind of trip up throughout the season. I think when you compare Florida State and Texas, I personally have more trust in Florida State in that, they look better. And I think overall, Florida State can probably handle the ACC better. But, we'll see. Texas, I think my main point really is that we saw in this week 2, I think that Florida State win over LSU was a better win than Alabama over Texas. Like, maybe that was because we've seen LSU, they have really bounced back. They dominate against Mississippi State. Daniels, the quarterback, Neighbors, receiver. That connection has been very good. And LSU looks like, LSU like a legit team that kind of had another early season stumble against Florida State, just like last year, except this year was even worse. Florida State really took it to them, and I think if you're a Florida State fan, like, yeah, you can worry about this game, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. It's a game away from home, slips up. Okay, you got out of there, regroup. You got Clemson coming up. You got a lot of big teams coming up. You got even Duke could be a sneaky one. You got North Carolina. Then you got to set up for these bigger ACC games. But kind of a fun introduction or, intro to ACC play. Wyoming versus Texas. It was kind of shaky in the beginning there with Wyoming and Texas. It was like, a 10-7 game. Even a 10-10 game at one point, and Texas is able to pull away. Again, the Alabama showing this week kind of made it like maybe Alabama is just straight up a bad team, and Texas is a good team but not a great team. I want to see more for Texas. See them play these Big 12 opponents, and we're getting to conference play, and that I think that's going to be exciting. This one, a little shaky at the start. They're able to handle them. Ohio State is the same story for Ohio State as Michigan, honestly, because Ohio State's a little shaky here and there, but they're fine just because they have straight up more talent. In this case, they straight up just blew the doors off of Western Kentucky in that second quarter. But then the next test is going to be Notre Dame. They go at Notre Dame. They're going to South Bend. I think this will be this is probably the number one must-watch game. Notre Dame and Ohio State. I think a top 10 matchup for sure. Definitely look out for that one. And it'll be like if Notre Dame can get this win, I think they can skyrocket. And this is going to be obviously Ohio State huge test. We'll see if McCord is legit. We'll see if Marvin Harrison can maybe boost himself into Heisman contention, and we'll see if this Notre Dame defense and Notre Dame offensive line can handle a big boy opponent like Ohio State. So I think that's probably the number one must-watch game. Penn State, they take care of business against Illinois, maybe a little upside trap. But again, I think Penn State has looked like the best team in the Big Ten throughout the first 3 weeks. I'm still giving the edge to Michigan because if, let's say Michigan and Penn State played right now, I think I'd pick Michigan to win, even though they've had kind of a lighter schedule, kind of, sleepwalking through the season so far. I think overall, Michigan is still better. But Penn State has looked very good, and overall their resume, I think, is probably the best so far. But it's a very early season anyway. Speaking of the Big Ten, guys, Michigan State has fallen from grace. There's the whole thing around their head coach, Tucker, I believe, and they got the doors blown off them against Washington. Speaking of a team who has high expectations but could, jump those expectations, I think is Washington. Michael Penix has looked very good in this season so far. I think he should probably be the Heisman #1. I think he's got the most yards among all quarterbacks across the country. Michael Penix, and that defense for Washington is very good. This is a very good Washington team. Look out for them. Who do they play? I believe they play Cal. They should get that win. Who knows, though, because it's the Pac-12. It's wild. But they start conference play with Cal, get a little warmed up. I want to see who they play next after that. But overall, Washington, at first I was like, hey, that's a pretty high ranking for Washington, #8. But I think they're proving they belong in that #8 spot and maybe even farther up, because I think Washington has looked like the best Pac-12 team for sure. They beat Boise State by a mile. They beat Tulsa by a mile, and they beat Michigan State by a mile. Coming up, they got Cal, and then they got at Arizona. That could be a random slip up. And then they have Oregon, and that will be huge, especially if Oregon can beat Colorado. That might set up a big top 10 matchup between those two rivals. But Washington, they've got a very tough schedule, just like all the Pac-12 teams now, because all the Pac-12 teams, it seems like, are doing very well. So we'll see if Washington is legit in the coming weeks. So far, they've showed that they are very good, and they beat up on a kind of vulnerable Michigan State team. But nonetheless, it was in East Lansing, and they beat them like 41-7. So I think that's still an impressive win for the Huskies. Let's go down, and we're just kind of going down the list. Notre Dame handles business against Central Michigan. We already kind of talked about Notre Dame. Sam Hartman there. Do they finally have a really good quarterback to lead them? They always have the defensive line and the offensive line in that running game. The missing piece has been the quarterback, and maybe Sam Hartman can be that missing piece. And then let's go to Alabama. Let's go to the failures of the SEC. This Alabama win felt like a loss. So much controversy around the quarterback change. I, like many others, thought they shouldn't have changed out Jalen Milroe. They changed him out for Buckner originally, and then Ty Simpson comes in. Both looked bad. Both weren't very good. And they really, this is exposed. I got a lot to say. First of all, they get the win. Okay, maybe you can regroup from this, focus up, and it's a win is a win, even though it kind of felt like a loss. You can regroup. I think you got to put Jalen Milroe back in that starting spot if you're Alabama, if you're Nick Saban. But going back to the Texas game, I don't think all the blame can be on Milroe. You look at the offensive line has not been very good for Alabama, and the play calling has not been very good. Tommy Rees, if he has another bad game like next week, I think he should probably be gone. I'd hate to, do a whole thing where like, you should fire him. You should fire, that's someone's job and everything, but he's just not doing a very good job. And the decision to bench Milroe, I think, was bad. And then you put in Buckner, and he does bad. And then I think they could have gone to Milroe at that point. But then they're like, no, let's go deeper on our chart. Ty Simpson comes out. He doesn't really have a great game. What got them the win was their defense was just bigger than USF. And USF couldn't score a freaking touchdown to save their lives, even though they had Alabama this close. The defense does their job, I guess, for Alabama. And then the running game, it's because they're just bigger. You look at Williams, he got the touchdown for Bama. And there was one drive where Simpson, he launched a nice pass, but, that's kind of expected against USF. Like, you got to be able to do that if you're an Alabama quarterback. And to win only 17-3 is very concerning for Alabama. I think they should move down in the rankings. I think you should have, probably your Utahs and your Oregons move up, especially when you look at the next game. do I have anything else more to say about Alabama? It's really, I think this is kind of showing, like, you look at Nick Saban throughout these past few years, he has had NFL level, like, starting quarterbacks throughout. You have to go back to, like, 2015 with Jake Coker to find a kind of team without that star NFL quarterback at the helm, and that was when they had Derrick Henry. They leaned more on the run, and that opened up that passing game, opened up the passing game to the tight ends, over the top plays. I think they need to go back to that because obviously I think the answer is Jalen Milroe, but I think Jalen Milroe, first of all, needs to grow more into the role. And really, I saw a good tweet that, I don't know if I can pull it out and pull it up, but it said that, it kind of has showed that these top 5-star players are kind of realizing, I don't really want to sit on the bench for 2-3 years for Nick Saban when there's NIL money out there and I can go somewhere else, get NIL money while I'm in college, build myself up to go to the draft by getting real playing experience instead of sitting on the bench for 2-3 years waiting my turn. And there's just so many colleges out there, and we've seen that the gap has kind of closed, and there's been so many more teams, especially you look at this season, that have so much talent. There's just so much talent across the country. Whereas, you look at before, like even just 5 years ago, all the top talent was in Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia. Basically, you'll have Oklahoma have a really good quarterback. But now I think the talent has spread out a bit more, and it's really catching up with Nick Saban. And we'll see how he does in conference play. And you got to remember, Texas, they're a year round from coming to the SEC. So you're going to have to play Texas damn near every year, Alabama. So you got to get ready for that. I was talking about, Texas, Oklahoma, y'all got to get ready for SEC play. Maybe it's got to be the other way around. Maybe these SEC teams have to get ready for Texas and Oklahoma. We'll continue with the SEC. Tennessee and Florida play, and Florida shows up and shows out in the swamp. I'm telling you guys, Florida is a completely different team when they got that swamp rocking at night. They are a completely different team. They showed up. They played big. Mertz played well. Travis Etienne's brother, I think Trevor Etienne. Trevor Etienne. He played really well. And Florida gets the win. They should be in the top 25. And this really showed, I think, Tennessee a bit overrated, kind of holdouts from last year, but they just don't quite have the same guys. Hendon Hooker and Hyatt are gone. So they got to find that kind of replacement. Milton, I think he needs to grow a bit more. He's got a cannon, but he's a little inaccurate, and I think Tennessee can bounce back from this, but we'll see. They got a lot more tougher opponents coming ahead, and maybe Florida, they just needed to get that first game out of the way against Utah. It was in Salt Lake City, which was rocking. Maybe Florida can have a bit more of a bounce back, but who knows? Do I really trust Florida all that much? Like if they go away from home, if they're on the road, my trust level in them probably decreases by about 50%. But we'll see. Overall, L's for the SEC across the board. I think, you look at LSU and Georgia. Okay, they get the win there, but you look at like Vanderbilt lost. A lot of teams, just SEC straight up not doing as well this season in at least the first 3 weeks. So yeah, Florida should be ranked. Utah and Oregon take care of business. They're going to have tests next, have some good teams come into their houses. Utah has a talented young UCLA team coming in. I think Utah can handle that, though. It will really depend also if Cam Rising is able to play. Maybe they were just resting him one more game. To me, it would be like maybe you warm them up against Weber State, maybe put them in the last, 5-10 minutes of that game after you pretty handling, 31-7. I think they could have done more. You look at Oregon, they've been running the score up on all these teams, or really just Portland State and Hawaii. They had kind of a close scare against Texas Tech. Utah and Oregon actually have just been 2-2 in tandem right now throughout the season, because Utah narrowly escaped Baylor. But I think overall, I would, even though Oregon has had the more dominating performances, I think that Florida win really should bump Utah up. I think Utah should stay above Oregon. I think, their schedule, obviously, I think it's been a bit tougher, and they're going to have another big test with UCLA coming into Salt Lake City, and then Oregon was going to have Colorado. We'll get into Colorado. They're able to squeak by, survive against Colorado State. That game was insane. It had me up till like midnight watching college football because I was just interested to see. That was a freaking good game. And hats off to Deion Sanders for having the whole country, stay, like, even if you're in Eastern time, the game probably ended at like 2 a.m. Shouts out to you guys if you're staying up that long to watch Deion Sanders and company. And they got the win. I think, honestly, you look at it, I wanted to kind of cheer for Colorado State. They're the underdogs. They're probably tired of hearing about Colorado and Deion Sanders. But they really didn't make it easy to cheer for them. First of all, number 11 with the hit on Travis Hunter. I hope that he's okay. I don't know if I have any updates. I can maybe look for updates on the Travis Hunter injury. But like, they didn't make it that easy to cheer for them, because they were really the ones that were starting the kind of scuffles and fights throughout, it seemed like. Obviously, Colorado was retaliating, but it kind of seemed like Colorado was starting it, and they kind of came off as salty a little bit. But it was a fun rivalry game, and it was a real classic one. Colorado, I think, even without Travis Hunter, I think they really should have not gone to overtime and really shouldn't have been down. They were down like 28-17, I think, at one point. But hats off to Shedeur Sanders to come back, to lead the team, get into overtime, then lead the team and get the W. I think that's a Heisman moment for Shedeur Sanders. And I mentioned it at the top of this season, even in like the off season, the quarterbacks all across the Pac-12. You got to have so many Heisman candidates. You got Michael Penix, you got Shedeur Sanders, you got Caleb Williams. Who, maybe DJ Uiagalelei could make a case into Oregon State is doing very well. I feel like I'm forgetting someone right now, but like, there's a lot of big-time quarterbacks. Oh, Bo Nix as well. He is running up the stat sheet with Oregon. He'll be out multiple weeks. That's going to hurt. That's your number one receiver and your number one defensive back, Travis Hunter. That is a real shame, and it was a complete cheap shot. That number 11 probably should have got thrown out of the game, honestly. For just personal foul. It wasn't really targeting. I think it was just personal foul. Should have got thrown out of the game. That's really unfortunate. He obviously he had hopes for Heisman. I guess maybe Shedeur Sanders can take the lead on that Colorado team, and that's going to make it even harder to win in Eugene. If you guys don't know, that Oregon crowd gets rocking, and that's a hard place to play. We mentioned LSU. I think LSU, I think they're a legit team. You look at the week one, yeah, that was a bad week one stumble, and maybe Florida State really is that good. It's just there's a lot of inconsistencies, because then you see Florida State barely squeak out a win against Boston College. But I think LSU, they might be licking their chops for an Alabama and for an Ole Miss. And speaking of Ole Miss, they play Alabama, and I think that's going to be a huge game to watch. How does Alabama respond? Can Lane Kiffin get the better of Nick Saban for once? Can he take advantage of a really shaky Alabama team? And we'll see how Jackson Dart has grown for Ole Miss. We talked about this. Kansas State goes down. Honestly, I didn't really believe all that much in Kansas State. They had a lot of guys leave after that Big 12 championship win. Missouri, they get the win. They should be in the top 25. Hey, maybe Missouri is kind of a surprise team in here. We'll see. Let's see who they play next. Hey, maybe they get, a surprise win. They played South Dakota in Middle Tennessee State. So it's like, but they have Memphis next. Then they have at Vanderbilt. Then they have LSU. So, we'll see we'll see in the next few weeks. As for all of these teams, we'll see in the next few weeks who is legit and who is not going into conference play and all of that. I still think it's kind of lame how SEC, you guys got 14 teams and you only play 8 conference games, whereas you got like the Pac12 and the Big Ten. I believe they play 9. It's just kind of kind of weak, honestly, SEC, and you guys aren't looking too good because I believe they only have like 4 teams in the top 25. Maybe they'll have more that Florida gets a win and Tennessee might stick around in those in the 20s spot. But we talked about, where were we? Yeah, Oregon State. DJ Uiagalelei is looking very good with Oregon State. Pretty much confirmed a mistake that Clemson let go of DJ. Oregon State looks really good. They could be another sneaky team, and they got a really good game coming up against Washington State. That is at Wazoo. Be sure to look out for that one. That's going to be a really good game against 2 top 25 teams. I might pick Washington State in that one just because they are at home. Cam Ward, experienced quarterback as well. He's looking very good as well. Like, even you got like the top tier Heisman quarterbacks, but then you have another tier like DJ and Cam Ward, and even you could sling in more from UCLA in that tier where, like, yeah, they're pretty good. They're not Heisman level, but they're really good college quarterbacks. Ole Miss, they're able to beat Georgia Tech. They got Bama next. That's going to be a huge game. Be sure to look out for that. Like, week 4, guys, is going to be so good. Week 4 is going to be so good. We talked about Colorado State. Oklahoma is running the score up. I think Oklahoma is maybe being a little overlooked. Yes, they, like, looking at their schedule, they really haven't played anyone of note. They played Tulsa, Arkansas State with Butch Jones loses 73-0, and then SMU. They got at Cincinnati to start conference play. That will be a big test, although Cincinnati has really fallen from grace. They lost, I forget against who for Cincinnati, but they lost against a team that they shouldn't have. Let's go to them real quick. Yeah, they lost to Miami of Ohio. Not Miami of Florida, Miami of Ohio. It didn't look too good for the Bearcats. Let's go back a few here. Round out this all the top 25 games. North Carolina, there's big expectations on Drake May. He hasn't really lived up to those, though. They are still 3-0, though. They are able to handle Minnesota. We'll see, when they play your Clemsons, your Florida States, how they handle that and how Drake May handles that. If they can string together a few wins, though, Drake May could reach himself back into that top number 1 Heisman candidacy. I think overall, though, at this point in the overall season, I think number 1, you got to give it to Michael Penix Jr. He's been playing the best. He's got the most yards. He's overall just been playing the best. Duke, I think they might be legit. They got, let's see who they got coming up. They got at UConn, winnable, and then they got Notre Dame. That's going to be, but like, if you think about it, if they can get an upset against Notre Dame, that would be huge. Like, let's say Notre Dame plays their heart out against Ohio State, and then they kind of slip up against Duke. Where are you putting Duke? You're putting Duke maybe in the top 10 at that point. After also beating Clemson, who was highly ranked at the time. So, again, the next few weeks, we'll see if Duke is legit. They got North Carolina State. That could be a test. And then at Florida State, at Louisville. Those are big games. So Duke and North Carolina. No, this isn't basketball. This is football, and they're both in the top 25. Interesting here. And we talked about Washington State. I think Washington State might be a little more under the radar Pac-12 team. I think they can. I'm picking them to win against Oregon State, and that could launch them up there. I think Cam Ward is a very good quarterback. They got a pretty good defense. They're able to handle Northern Colorado. That says they're 0-3. You know, just supposed to win that. And then you look down UCLA. They're gonna have to go in and play Utah. As I mentioned, they run up the score on North Carolina Central, 59 points. It'll be interesting to see. They got a really young quarterback. I was initially pretty high on UCLA, but then I was looking more into it. Like, they're a younger team. When we get into conference play, we'll see how well they do. And Utah's obviously a huge test, and that's going to be another must-watch game. Iowa, they play Penn State next week. Iowa definitely could look to get the upset against Penn State. Again, as I've said, is that they're looking like the top team in the Big Ten, just based on resume and just the way they've looked. Iowa, though, they can get the upset. I believe it is at Iowa as well. So let's go to the Twitter-X or whatever you want to call it. Make sure to follow me there at Membro_CFW to follow the Twitter, because I kind of just post what, my conversation about the games that I'm watching. And you can get a lot more of my content there, what I'm thinking. So make sure to go follow that. That's at Membro_CFW. But I want to go to this that I posted. I want to go to this one, my top 10 after week 3. So as you notice, it's a bit different from the AP one. I might want to move Texas up, because when I did make this, Texas was like in a 10-10 game. It was very late at night, and Texas was at about, or it does say 8:39. So yeah, like I think Texas was still going through their game. Might want to move them up. But anyway, Georgia number 1 and Michigan number 2. Number 1 for Georgia. They showed why they're the number 1 team in the country by coming back and beating South Carolina. Michigan, they haven't really played anyone, but I'm giving them the grace of last year. And you see, hey, they still got JJ McCarthy. They still got Blake Corum. Let's see what they can do. We know they have a lot of talent. They have a real easy schedule. And like as the season goes on, I think honestly, if they keep winning, but other teams prove like Penn State, if they're able to really beat Iowa, in Iowa, maybe I could move Penn State above Michigan. As you can see here, Penn State, I got them at number 3, really high on them. I think they just overall looked very good. Then I got Washington. Washington looks like the best team in the Pac-12 right now. Michael Penix Jr. is got to be the number 1 Heisman candidate at this point. They are looking very good. They have Cal coming into town. Better not slip up on that one. Then we got Florida State. Florida State, as I've explained, they narrowly eked by Boston College, but again, that was a very tough game. And when we've seen what LSU is doing to teams right now, like Mississippi State and then McNeese State, which they were supposed to do, LSU is looking like a very good team. And Florida State won double digits, almost by near 20. I believe it was like something like 45-24. I don't remember the exact score, but they beat LSU pretty handily. I think got them at number 5. Then we have USC. They had the bye week this week. They have at Arizona State. That could be a little testy game. We'll see how they show up, how Caleb Williams maybe get back into that spotlight. Got them at number 6. Got number 7, Ohio State. Overall, with the Big Ten teams, Ohio State overall just looked a little shaky, and I'll be interested to see how they perform against Notre Dame, Notre Dame is my number 8 team. Notre Dame, they look like this could maybe be their year. They got a quarterback, and they got that usual, big beef up front in the offensive line and in the defensive line. Obviously, huge test against Ohio State. Then I have number 9, Utah. They beat Florida, who now Florida beats number 11, Tennessee. So that is looking like a pretty good win. They handle Weber State. And then Texas at number 10. Honestly, just like Alabama might straight up not be that good this year, guys. So, again, that win still is impressive. So, maybe I would want to move Texas up to number 9 and switch them with Utah. You guys can let me know what your top 10 is down in the comments below. But a lot of exciting games next week. And this week was surprisingly exciting. So, thank you guys all for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube and subscribe to the podcast on like Spotify. Make sure to follow the Twitter at Membro _CFW. All right, guys. Peace.